April 26, 1943. 27,000 feet above Nazi-occupied France, the sky looked calm, almost peaceful. But for Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson, those next few minutes would turn into something no pilot should ever survive, because death wasn't just near, it was already locked onto him. Inside his Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the largest single-engine fighter in the sky, Johnson had only recently entered combat, still learning the brutal reality of aerial warfare against the highly experienced German Luftwaffe. And as his formation moved across France, the attack came without warning. German fighters diving out of the sun, fast, precise, deadly, their preferred method perfected over years of war. And before the Americans could even react, the sky exploded into chaos. Tracers slicing through the air, aircraft breaking formation, pilots shouting over the radio. And in those first few seconds, Johnson made a mistake that nearly cost him everything. He hesitated just for a moment, and that was enough. A German Focke-Wulf FW-190 locked onto him from behind, closing the distance rapidly. And then came the first burst of fire, a violent udar that slammed into the Thunderbolt, shaking it like a toy, followed instantly by another and another, until the aircraft was no longer a machine, but a target being torn apart mid-air. Cannon shells exploding across the fuselage, ripping metal open, shattering the canopy, sending shards of glass and fragments into the cockpit, wounding Johnson in the face and leg as oil from the damaged engine sprayed across the windscreen, blinding him, the cockpit filling with smoke, alarms failing, instruments dying, and in that moment, instinct took over. He reached to bail out, to escape before the plane exploded, but the canopy wouldn't move. A 20mm shell had jammed it shut, sealing him inside a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet, with no way out, no control, and no clear view ahead. And as his formation disappeared into the distance, he was left alone, falling behind, the perfect target drifting helplessly through hostile skies, and the German pilot behind him knew it. This was supposed to be easy, a clean kill, a quick victory, and as he lined up again, he fired from point-blank range, unleashing everything, cannon shells tearing into the wings, machine gun rounds hammering the fuselage, the kind of concentrated fire that should have instantly destroyed any fighter in existence. And Johnson braced himself, pressing back into the armored seat, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the end. But it never came, because somehow, impossibly, the Thunderbolt kept flying, absorbing punishment that defied logic, its massive radial engine refusing to quit, its thick armor holding together just enough, its structure damaged but not destroyed. And the German pilot, confused, pulled up and circled back, unable to understand what he had just seen, because no aircraft should survive that, no pilot should still be alive. Yet there it was, still moving, still in the air, and so he attacked again, determined to finish it, firing another burst, then another, emptying more ammunition into the crippled American fighter. And again, the Thunderbolt shuddered violently, more holes ripping through its body, more systems failing, more damage piling onto what was already a flying wreck, until over 200 rounds had struck the aircraft, tearing away metal, damaging the engine, severing control lines. Yet still, it did not fall. And now something changed. Something unexpected even in the middle of war, as the German pilot slowed and pulled alongside the broken Thunderbolt, close enough to see inside the cockpit, expecting to find a lifeless pilot or a man already finished. But instead, he saw Johnson, bleeding, half-blind, barely conscious, yet still fighting to keep the aircraft level, still refusing to die, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Two enemies suspended in the sky, one with every advantage, the other with nothing left but survival. And what happened next would become one of the most mysterious and human moments of the war. The German pilot didn't fire, didn't attack. Instead, he simply stared, shook his head in disbelief, and then raised his hand in a brief, almost respectful salute, before turning away and disappearing into the sky, leaving Johnson alive when he could have ended it in seconds. And now, alone once again, the real battle began, not against an enemy, but against the failing machine itself, because getting shot down was only half the danger. Surviving the return was the real challenge, and Johnson had to fly a destroyed aircraft all the way back to England, across the Channel, with almost no visibility, a failing engine, and controls that barely responded, every second threatening to be his last, every vibration feeling like the one that would tear the plane apart. But he kept going, adjusting by instinct, feeling the aircraft rather than seeing it, holding it together through sheer determination as minutes stretched endlessly, until finally, through the blurred, oil-covered glass, he saw the English coastline, a sight that must have felt unreal, almost impossible. And yet even then, the danger wasn't over, because landing a normal aircraft was difficult enough. Landing one that had been shredded by cannon fire was something else entirely. But Johnson had no choice, slowly bringing the Thunderbolt down, fighting the damaged controls, aligning for the runway, knowing one mistake would end everything. And then, impact. The wheels touched the ground, the aircraft bounced, nearly collapsing, but stayed upright, rolling forward until it finally stopped. And in that moment, against every expectation, he had made it back alive. And when ground crews rushed toward the plane, what they saw left them stunned, because this wasn't an aircraft that should have flown. It was barely an aircraft at all. Over 200 bullet and cannon holes covering its surface, the fuselage torn open, internal systems destroyed, parts missing, the engine on the verge of total failure, damage that would have destroyed any other fighter in seconds. Yet this one had carried its pilot all the way home, proving something that would soon become clear across the skies of Europe, that the P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't just powerful, it was nearly indestructible, a machine built not just to fight, but to survive. And that day, April 26, 1943, became more than just a story of one pilot's survival. It became a turning point in how the war in the air would be fought, because pilots like Robert S. Johnson would go on to master this aircraft, using its strength, speed, and firepower to dominate enemies who once believed it was too heavy, too slow, too easy to defeat. And Johnson himself would become one of America's top aces, scoring 27 victories before the war ended. But no number, no statistic, no later victory would ever match what happened on that day, when a pilot trapped inside a dying aircraft, with no escape and no hope, faced everything the enemy could throw at him, and still refused to fall. Because sometimes survival isn't about skill alone, and it isn't about luck either. Sometimes it's about a machine that won't break, a pilot who won't quit, and a moment in the middle of war where even an enemy recognizes something extraordinary and chooses, just once, not to pull the trigger.